Good morning, it's July 24th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Well, Joe Biden is finally setting on a campaign theme as he runs for a second term. The theme will be Bidenomics. This past week, he spoke at a shipyard in Philadelphia and told those in attendance the economy is strong. Quote, "It's not an accident, it's my economic plan in action," Biden told a crowd of mostly union workers Thursday on his latest stop in his nationwide record-burnishing tour. Quote, "Together, we're transforming the country," end quote. I think it bears looking at how we got into this situation and how Biden can make these type of claims and actually think they're true. The first thing he had to do was print a lot of money during the pandemic and pass those checks out to just about everyone in the country. There was never a thought about if the individuals really needed the handout. Just send the checks and tell everyone how you're helping them out. But the result was a massive infusion of money into the economic system, and the result was, you guessed it, high inflation. You simply cannot just print money and not expect inflation. You're cheapening the dollar with each and every new one you inject into the economy. Now I'll use one of my children as an example of how misguided this policy was. My daughter was a school teacher. During the pandemic, she worked remotely with her students, and mostly importantly, she received her full salary while teaching during the pandemic. Her husband is in software sales, and almost 100% of his job is done remotely. He worked throughout the pandemic and coordinated with his team via Zoom and other remote methods. He received his full salary during the pandemic, but they qualified for stimulus checks, and so they received one for each of them and for their two children. Did they like the extra cash? Absolutely. But did they need this extra cash to survive? No. Now let's compare them to another couple. The wife's a waitress and the husband's a carpenter that frames houses. During the pandemic, the government forced the restaurant that the woman worked at to close. That removed her income from the family. The home building industry started to slow down dramatically as government agencies quit issuing building permits, and workers like her husband were either cut way back or did not work at all. The couple also has two children. They certainly qualified for stimulus checks. Did they need this extra cash to survive during the pandemic? Yes, they did. What the government should have done was send the checks out to people and then determine the threshold of income that warranted getting the stimulus checks. When you filed your 1040 tax return, if your income was above a certain level, and those levels should never have been as high as the Biden administration made them, where a couple making up to $150,000 a year qualified, well, if you're below that whatever level we set, then you have to repay the money when it came time to file your taxes. That would have targeted those people that truly needed the help and drastically cut down on the amount of money being handed out by the government. And remember, these checks were not sent out once, but twice, and sometimes three times. Well, getting back to Bidenomics, we saw the result was a huge deficit spending bills, soaring inflation that peaked at 9%, the price of gas reached nearly $5 a gallon, and higher interest rates as the Federal Reserve jumped in finally and tried to tamp down the resulting inflation. So now Joe Biden claims he's reducing the deficit. This takes a lot of chutzpah, in my opinion. This would be similar to you spending $50,000 on a credit card in 1 year. You realize you can't keep doing this and the card's maxed out. So you get another card, but this time you only spend $25,000 on the card in that year. You pat yourself on the back and say that you reduced your spending, but guess what? You still owe the first 50 grand, and now you've added another 25,000. That's exactly what Biden is saying, and ignoring the debt that he's accumulating for the American public that will someday have to be paid, but he'll be long gone. And I don't think the voters of this country are being completely fooled. Oh, there will be always those who want more government goodies given to them. We see that with Biden continually trying to find a way to forgive student debt so these people will vote for him. Biden is using the same smoke and mirrors when it comes to jobs. We all know that millions of jobs were lost, or shall we say put on hold, during the pandemic. As the pandemic eased, those jobs started to return. Biden wants you to think it was him and his policies that brought these jobs back. He even says he created them. He forgets he took them away with some onerous government policies that shut down the economy. A Monmouth University poll released last Wednesday showed that 3 in 10 Americans feel the country is doing a better job recovering economically than the rest of the world since the COVID-19 pandemic. 3 out of 10 only. Respondents were split on Biden's handling of the economy and unemployment, with 47% approving and 48% disapproving of his performance. But poll after poll puts Biden in a negative with job approval. They're not going to be like a lamb being led to slaughter. They live in the real world. They have to go to the grocery store, buy gasoline, pay rent, get a mortgage, etc. And they see the real impact that so many of the Bidenomic policies have had on their lives. The Bidenomics message seems to be all strategy, little substance, and generally off the mark at a moment when the president desperately needs to convince the country that his leadership is better than the alternative. And asking politicians to set aside strategic and messaging gimmicks is probably too much to ask. For the Biden team needs to give voters some credit for understanding all the issues that matter, and basically they're not buying what he's trying to sell, and Bidenomics isn't working for them. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, recommend it to your friends. And if you have a comment, please leave it. Thank you.